Ouchies Batrep, brought to you in part by my dice. The only dice capable of failing a 1+ save. You should try it sometime, it's pretty cool. Ah, heavy panzers. It's the best kind of panzer. The Royal Tiger makes a showing again with the same list that I ran against Yank Jaeger in the video before in the warm-up for this tourney. And my opponent in the first round of the Tanker Street tourney is none other than Gearbarbs. I had given him some advice in his warm-up for the same tourney itself, and it turns out he followed some of the advice. It's pretty amazing. I can't seem to get anybody else to pay attention to me. I seem to be kind of a wallflower, so it's amazing when it happens. The mission today is Pincer, 1780 points. I'm defending on this one. The advice is apropos because I happen to run a very similar list. It's 51st Scots, I do believe. It's been a while since I've ran it, but I had an issue that he seemed to have too, where you just don't get aggressive enough. You have to find an objective, and this is true with many armor lists. Find an objective and then just pour yourself into it and take advantage of the fact that as an attacker, you're usually outnumbering your opponent with all of your force on the board, or at least most of the force on the board. And Pincer is one of those scenarios that's going to be the case. There's actually a slight mistake here. I have my half-tracks, and, well, the supply truck might be able to stay, but the half-tracks aren't supposed to be there. I don't have the mounted assault rule with the Pioneers, but it's not going to make a difference. They're going to get off the board immediately. And he makes an early recce move with his little Stuarts right up the right side of the board, and really, he's racing up against a King Tiger. That's actually the CO over there on the right side of the board. I don't have much to fear from him. I do believe his AT is 7, and the side armor on the King Tiger is 8. He gets air support on the first turn and zeroes in on the infantry out in the field, protecting the left ammo dump that conspicuously was left out in the street. We assume they're stolen stereos or something. You know, fell out of the back of the truck. But for being woodsmen, they sure don't know how to get through the woods, as nearly his entire tank destroyer company and a Sherman bogs with quadruple ones there. It was pretty spectacular. In this matchup, I have quite stunning localized superiority. There's not a whole lot a lot of those tanks can do to hurt me. As a matter of fact, there's not many tanks in the game that can hurt King Tiger front on, except for other King Tigers. I think they might be able to bail them shooting him from the front. But his objective is going to be, from the beginning, to get to the sides. I get air support on the first turn. It shocks me completely. And, of course, the transport elements immediately disembark from the field, pulling back to the rear, and the King Tiger doesn't go unnoticed as he finds the CO of the Shermans over there on the left flank and manages to nail the captain. If it wasn't for German mission tactics, he might have had an issue right there. But right across the board, the CO gets first kill. Even the 2IC begins peppering the infantry crossing the field and manages to kill a couple stands. It's quite unlikely. It's actually quite fantastic. The dice are working for me. This is awesome. It's a great start to the tourney. Meanwhile, on the left flank, his Shermans begin charging up towards the objective, trying to stay out of the minefield that's actually right there in front of the infantry. And he gets air support again. He has limited air, which, you know, it should come in most of the time. And I fail to intercept him. Meanwhile, in the woods, he tries to unbog some of those tanks, and wouldn't you know it, the M10 and the Sherman decides that it is better to stay where they are. Somebody had heard that someone somewhere might have heard that there was a King Tiger and he got shot, and decided it's probably better to sit back here in the woods. But in the interim, all their buddies decide to charge through the woods without incident. The Shermans on the left flank begin peppering the infantry, preparing for an assault, smoke the Tiger to help alleviate some of the firepower that might be coming from it, and in the process they realize that the airplane is just a little too close to the Shermans and has to get waved off. The entire strike is called off. But on the right flank, the Shermans are hugging the bocage, trying to stay out of line of sight of that Sherman tank in front of them, and trying to set up the timing just right so that they can swing out and apply their full power against the tank. The infantry, however, open in the field, decide to dig in to save the remaining men, and they do so successfully. Meanwhile, the 2IC, unimpeded by the smoke, decides to swing the turret around and nails another Sherman out in the open. And it goes right to firepower and eviscerates the tank and everyone inside. My sporadic air support comes in again and weathers a hail of 50 cal fire from the various tanks in there. All of them have anti-aircraft fire, and manages to only whittle it down to one plane. And in response, I'm able to bail one of the M10s. Not bad. I wish it would have killed one of them, but you can take what you get. On the left flank, the Canadians begin pushing wide around the minefield, preparing for an assault against the infantry, and start peppering the mess out of them with machine gun fire. On the east side of the board, the Shermans begin swinging wide. Again, they're being very careful to not expose themselves to the King Tiger tank that in the turn prior decided to go ahead and go to ground. It didn't have a really good target to shoot at, so there's no reason to make it easier to be shot. And just the same, they are hoarding across the field. All the tanks are now going to start converging on the center mass of the board, and there's more targets than the King Tiger probably has ammo. It must be some sort of consolation to the Canadians, though, as they charge the tanks into the Pioneering Company, showing absolutely no regard to their own safety as they try to take the ammo from the back of the truck objective from the Germans. It's a rough fight. They are AT4 if they get a swing back, so they go ahead and the Canadians make it the best that they can, and they manage to make the kill. They kill the stand, force morale against the Germans, and they decide that it's better to stay in the foxholes over by the woods. This is a disaster. The Canadians now have the objective, and they are poised to win the game if they can't do something to dislodge the Canadians from the objective. Meanwhile, on the northern end of the board, the Sherman and the M10 continue to bog in the woods. They certainly don't want to join the fight that's going on the west end of the board. Air support ranges in on the infantry out in the open, managing to pin their advance, at least for a little while reinforcements in the form of a King Tiger tank begin racing up the west side of the board, attempting to dislodge the Shermans that are currently holding the German objective. The CO successfully gun tanks the Firefly and causes the crew to have to bail out and change pants, but it is followed up by the reinforcements as they succeed in destroying the Firefly, gun tanking it for a second time. I start to realize that this might be a mistake. I should have not gun tanked it a second time and just allocated the hit to another tank, but he fails motivation anyway, and it causes the unit to break out. The CO decides to stay, fight on, and so I'm going to have to assault it. I try to get the Pioneers out there to take it on, but they decide it's better to stay in the foxholes. I go ahead and follow it up and try to stormtrooper the King Tiger out there just to contest the objective, and it fails that too. Canada wins 5-2 victory, and those darn tanks are still stuck out there in the woods, presumably eating crumpets or tea or whatever it is that they might be entertained with. And that's been an Ouchies Batrep, and thanks for watching. I actually talked to that guy later on. Those two tanks managed to bog in all the other games as well. I just couldn't get any luck with them, could he?